there! I started this journal page with stencils by the Crafters Workshop, the dashed lines and blazonry stencil. Then I added some watercolor, and then I decided to glue some papers onto the background. I did a little rubber stamping. This particular stamp is from Pam Garrison. And then I added a few more paper scraps. Things in my stash, things that I've had, maybe some old papers I've painted, just a variety. Old letters, wallpaper, inky papers, ledger papers. And I used a Yoo-Hoo glue stick to apply those to my page. I like Yoo-Hoo glue stick, but use whatever glue is your preference. This particular scrap was just painted on some old magazine papers. So I just placed them down randomly around the page. That's a piece of wallpaper. And then a little more stamping. This one is by Jenny Doe. I like this little border stamp. And then washi tape. I added a couple different strips of colorful washi tape to the page and random places on it. Next, more rubber stamping. Some arrow stamps. I'm using a black pad for all my stamping on this project. And then I'm using some Radiant Rain. I just poured it onto my paper to work with, and I used a blending stump to just grab the color and create some dots and create some circles on my page. I'm using some Liquitex acrylic ink here to enhance the circles a little bit. And then I'm going to use a white pen. It's a Signo Uniball white pen to fill in the color, fill in the white into these circles. More color with the blending stump onto my page. I'm just drawing these lines in between the stamp lines. More Radiant Rain color. I'm just using that color to create some lines on the page in variations around the page. Next, I glued on some wallpaper, or actually I think that's handmade paper, and then used the blending stump to add some more color. I started out creating this circle and then decided to add some acrylic to it to make it stand out more, and then I didn't like the yellow. I didn't think it stood out very much, and so then I went with some olive green, which ultimately I ended up liking. So if the first layer doesn't work, try something else. And then next I took the same acrylic paint and just did some half circles at the top of the page, and a lighter blue with my paintbrush. And then I used the blending stump again with some of that Liquitex paint that I used earlier when I did the circles. And then next I just used my fingertip to create some dots along the bottom of the page with some of the light blue paint that I used at the top. And then I went back to the Radiant Rain color again. It's not acrylic, but it's a little bit, you can tell it's pretty liquid. And then I just dabbed on a few circles with that color as well. Next, I used some Payne's Gray Black, which actually to me looks like a really pretty dark blue. And then I filled in those little white circles with some black dots. And then used my paintbrush to take the same color, the Payne's Gray acrylic, and add some contrast to the page. So I'm just kind of following the lines of those half circles I made at the top with the Payne's Gray. And then I went ahead and did a little enhancing on that green circle at the top. You can kind of tell this color really is pretty. It's not really black, but it still gives you the contrast. And then I drew some lines with the paintbrush, with the Payne's Gray. Next, I'm just adding some half circles to the inside of those stenciled shapes. And then white, just with my fingertips, just kind of brushing that on a little bit with my fingers. You can really tell how much it changes the look of things when you start adding, after the color, you add in your darks and then your white for your contrast. And then I just kind of rubbed some white paint all over the rest of the page. No rhyme or reason, just wherever I felt like it needed it. A little more stamping. This chevron stamp is also by Pam Garrison. I got those in her Etsy shop. And then I used the blending stump again with some of the Radiant Rain ink to just fill in some color between the stamped lines of the chevron stamp. And then you can add some acrylic if you want. I added a little bit of that blue that I used on those half circles, also with the blending stump. Next, I decided to take a piece of, well, it's an old letter, and I cut a shape out that mimics the shape from the blazonry stencil, that shape. And I cut out the center and decided to just glue it on the page. Again, I'm using the Yoo-Hoo glue stick for that. I kind of placed it around the page a little bit to decide where I thought it looked best, and this is ultimately where I put it. I'm going to press down good, make sure it's in place. And then I decided to go back to that lime green paint again. And I didn't like those orange circles, so I went over them with green. If you don't like it, you can always paint over it. And next I used my black doodle pen to do some shapes around that long shape. And I filled in some of the circles with black, and then I went back with the white pen and filled in some with white. Kind of looks like a bug. Then I went back to the Payne's Gray, did a little more enhancing on those green circles at the bottom, make those stand out a little bit more. And then also I used the Payne's Gray to sort of add a little highlight to that paper that I glued down. So I just went around some of the edges and just sort of brushed on a little bit of that Payne's Gray onto that. And then I added some white, again, just with my fingertip. I find that fairly easy to do. Sometimes a little easier than the paintbrush. And then next I went back and just filled in the rest of the white, or the rest of those circles with the white pen. I'm not sure why I stopped on that first round, but I guess I decided to add some more paint and then come back to it. So I went back in and filled on, alternating the black with the white to make that doodle around the edge stand out. And then next I used some Liquitex ink, the liquid ink with the dropper. I decided I didn't like the way this shape looked. Actually, I'm going to change it again later, but I'll come back to that. So I have a little tag and decided to doodle on that to kind of mimic what was on that large piece of paper that I glued on. And I'll just journal on that in a little bit. Sometimes I move around if I'm not sure if I like something or not, and then I just come back to it. Next, I went back to that chevron shape again. I felt like it needed a brighter color, so I went with a colored pencil instead of the green. I think it just got lost on that shape, and then I filled in some of that with the pencil. And then just use the same pencil to doodle around, just add some color, added in a blue pencil. To just add some lines here and there. And then I went and used a watercolor brush and just went back over some of the pencil marks to kind of blend them a little bit on the little circles, and then some of the lines I did just to blend them. And then next, I decided I didn't like those shapes. So I went over those two shapes with some white paint. And while that was drying, I just added in some more washi tape onto the bottom. And then I decided to do a little rubber stamping. This is an alphabet stamp. I stamped it in the bottom, and then I stamped the letters up at the top in that little half circle shape that I did earlier. And then I went back to the shapes again, went back and added some more of that green, same color, that Liquitex acrylic in the green. And then when it dried, I decided to go ahead and add some white paint to it. And I just kind of used that to give it a little dimension. I think I might have even rubbed it a little bit with some darker color just to kind of give it some dimension. I just didn't like it the way it was. And then I journaled onto my square. Notice I didn't quite fit everything in the square. I went off the square a little bit. I like doing that. And then just little bits of enhancing. I just took my black pen and just scribbled around the border of that paper where the shape was, just to kind of pull everything together. That's always a great way to just put a finishing touch on things. And then I decided I was finished. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed it.